Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Tuesday, November 15th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Maryland game is in 4 days, the game against Michigan in 11 days. Week 3 of the college football playoff rankings will come out tonight, and the list of teams who could possibly make the field is shrinking every week at this point. Today, we're going to take a look at the teams still at least theoretically in the chase and break them down into 4 categories. Ones that might still get in even with a loss, ones who are winning you're in, ones who need a little help, and ones who are in the so you're telling me there's a chance group. There's always a chance you're going to hear from Tony Gerdeman of Buckeye Huddle on the show. Today's your lucky day. He is here. Tony, a bunch of things changed over the weekend. Ole Miss lost, so they're out. TCU got a big win. But to me, the biggest news came out of the Pac-12, which basically, just in the most Pac-12 fashion, completely blew up its chances. Oregon lost. UCLA lost to Arizona somehow. And now USC is their last best hope and still has UCLA and Notre Dame on the schedule. Tony, what could possibly go wrong?
What could possibly go wrong indeed? And USC is going to be a fun one. This is a big Pac-12 weekend, which I'm sure we'll get into, but there's still, Tom, there's still a lot to go wrong. And the worst possible thing that could go wrong is probably LSU winning the SEC.
Yeah, we'll get to LSU in a minute. Let's start with the teams that might still get in, even with a loss. It feels to me like there's 3 of those. Georgia feels like they're basically in already. I mean, they're viewed as a clear-cut number 1. They have at Kentucky and Georgia Tech left, so a team that has already fired its coach and a team that just lost to literally Vanderbilt at home. So yes, that's Georgia. We're just going to go ahead and write Georgia into the field of 4 at somewhere there with Penn. But you know, I think Ohio State's in that group as well. Of at least could get in and probably maybe will get in, even with a close loss in the Michigan game. Because, I mean, the resume right now, they're number 2. They're viewed as a pretty clear number 2, it feels like. Penn State was 14th in the rankings last week, but number 11 and number 12 both lost, and Penn State, unless something really stupid happens, is going to finish 10-2 and potentially a top 10 team. Notre Dame is 20th, but they, 16, 17, and 18 all lost last week, and Notre Dame didn't look great, but they also didn't lose. So, you could have a top 10 and a top 12 or top 15 win if they both win out, and Notre Dame has already beaten Clemson and North Carolina. I mean, it feels to me like you probably have a better than 50-50 chance of, unless a bunch of stuff goes wrong, if it is Ohio State versus Tennessee or something like that for that last spot, it feels like Ohio State's at least a even money, or even maybe better than that favorite to sneak into the field somewhere.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And that, of course, depends on what happens below them with one-loss conference champs. But even then, I don't know how much the committee is going to want to put in a Clemson and we'll get, down to those, but it's going to compare resumes, and the committee will then have a chance to manufacture, like, well, do we really want, what matchup do we really want? Who has the better chance of winning those games? And when you look at Ohio State, if their only loss is to the number 2 team in the nation, and it's a close one because Michigan would obviously be number 2 at that point, then that's one of those where unless 3 things below them happen just in the right way or the wrong way for Ohio State, I think I'm with you where they'd probably be the number 4 team, and Buckeye fans probably don't want to hear that, or maybe they do because we're talking about an Ohio State loss to Michigan not being all that bad. But you've put the resume together, and you've got the wins, and a couple of those wins may be able to trump the number of wins and a conference title from the other teams below them.
And, Michigan, I think, is in that group as well, where if, yes, there's a bunch of ways that if certain combinations of teams win, they could lose to Ohio State and then be left out. But, they wrap up with Illinois at home, and then at Ohio State, the Illinois game is looking a lot less upset alerty than it did a couple weeks ago, as Illinois has kind of fallen apart. And, Michigan does not have the resume that Ohio State has right now, where really Ohio State has 2 good ranked wins. Michigan has the one win against Penn State, which was pretty impressive, but the non-conference schedule is doing them no favors right now. It feels like Michigan losing on the road at Ohio State close. It's a 35-31 game, 35-27 game, whatever it is. The fact that it's on the road, you're the third ranked team. You're supposed to lose to the second ranked team. That's how this works, especially on the road. If it's close, there's obviously a very clear argument for them, but also you don't quite have the resume that Ohio State does. And so, you're getting into the point where you're going to have real serious conversations about Tennessee versus Michigan. And, Tennessee has a win over Alabama. So, is that better than Michigan's win over Penn State? Well, it was, by not nearly as many points, but is Alabama better than Penn State this year and all that? So you're going to have those conversations where at that point, it is legitimately a debate, maybe more so than Ohio State versus Tennessee could be.
Absolutely. And even a win over Illinois won't be seen very well because we know the committee doesn't really care about Illinois, doesn't really believe in Illinois, but I believe Chase Brown is out now. So he suffered an injury in their game against Purdue. So if you're playing Illinois without their best player and you beat them, that carries almost no weight. And so what Michigan has going for it is the win over Penn State and the win over Connecticut. Bowl eligible Connecticut at this point is their big, their second biggest win, maybe looking over their, we know Ohio State and Michigan have both had similar conference schedules, and it's not great because the Big Ten is not great this year. But when all you have is that one win over Penn State, and you're compared to a Tennessee or Tennessee specifically, who has the wins that they do, that's going to be really, really difficult for Michigan to overcome that, especially given the style that they play. Because the committee is going to look, and if you're pitting them against Georgia again, like, well, I saw what happened last year. Is the committee going to want to do that again? You give a team that you have seen in the first half of Big Ten games this year where they're not blowing teams out, they're not asserting themselves, and they wait until the second half. You can't play that same way when the competition increases.
And, I think there's a very logical argument for Michigan fans to we saw what happens when Georgia plays Michigan. It's like, well, we just saw what happened when Georgia played Tennessee, and that wasn't much of a game either. So that it would be a very fair rebuttal there for Michigan fans. Next category up is the win in your in teams. And I don't have Tennessee in this category. I think this is two teams, TCU and LSU. And, LSU is ranked way behind where Tennessee is. TCU handled their business against Texas. It was not at all the game anyone expected, I don't think, but gave up 3 points to the Texas offense and just absolutely handed Texas 7 points towards the end of the game. Ended up winning 17-10. They finish at Baylor, which is, Baylor is not the best version of recent vintage Baylor, but they're okay. And then home for Iowa State, and then Big 12 championship game against Kansas State, maybe? It's kind of a question mark there. LSU, they wrap up. They play UAB this week at Texas A&M. Speaking of games that didn't looked a little more daunting at the beginning of the season than they do now. But then LSU to me is a win in your in team, because if you win and you're in, that means you're beating Georgia. And at that point, you have the best win of anyone in the schedule. And that's a team that I think could potentially, if Georgia Georgia's, assume we were in, Ohio State, Michigan wins the Big Ten, they're in. If TCU keeps winning, LSU winning and, getting the third seed or something like that after beating Georgia, that feels like one that could be a real that would be a bad result for Michigan, or the Michigan-Ohio State winner, I would say.
Well, you see that when you're in and LSU with 2 losses. Tell me the scenario in which they don't make it if they beat Georgia, because I don't know. I can't come up with one, because they're going to have the like you said, the best win. They will have the comparison with all of these one-loss conference champs, assuming there are some there. It won't matter. I don't see the ACC or the Pac-12 having that argument, even with the champs, because it's an LSU program that will have beaten Alabama, will have beaten Georgia, and all of the benefit of the doubt will go with them. And the loss to Florida State at that point is like, well, that was a long time ago. I will say that comparing LSU with a one-loss ACC team, conference champ, where that team will have transitively or maybe personally beaten Florida State maybe gives them some argument, but good luck arguing with the committee about leaving an SEC champ out of the playoffs, and good luck leaving Georgia in there and leaving LSU out. It's almost like, well, if we want Georgia in, we have to invite LSU.
Right. And that feels like, Alabama is wrapping up with Austin Peay and Auburn, so they're not going to lose again. So they're going to be 10-2. And yeah, this is not a great Alabama team by any means, but that's going to be a top 10 win over Alabama. You're going to have a top 10 win over, top 3 win over Georgia at that point. So at that, what is the Clemson argument? Well, we played Notre Dame kind of tough and beat, North Carolina. So hooray! Twice. Yeah. I mean, no. They only beat them once. Yeah. I have Notre Dame or North Carolina and Clemson on the next or 2 groups from now, but. That's sort of a 12-1 conference champion has only been left out once, and that was Ohio State in 2018. But this feels like a year where you're shaping up to have whoever wins the ACC just not have a good resume and get left out. Next category, I have Tennessee. Need a little help. They are not an automatic win and you're in. They wrap up with at South Carolina and at Vanderbilt, so you're going to win the last 2 games. You're going to finish 11-1, but you're not going to win the division. You're not going to, you're not going to go to the SEC championship game. The Alabama win, that holds up. That's going to be a top 10 win. So, okay. The Kentucky win, oh boy, Kentucky, baby. What is you doing? That is Kentucky probably not going to be ranked this week. Heading into we'll find out together Tuesday night when the committee releases its rankings. But if Kentucky's ranked after being 24th and then losing to Vanderbilt, I'm going to have some questions. Tennessee, I mean, what is Tennessee rooting for? Tennessee has to be rooting for, TCU to lose, Georgia to win the SEC, and then the Ohio State-Michigan game to be a 2-score game at least, I would say, right?
Well, I also think, I think Tennessee's going to have a tough time against the ACC one-loss conference champ because they will have the extra data point, and so that will make life difficult for them for a team that didn't win its division. So I think they need quite a bit of help, but also all of that help none of that help is entirely unlikely. So there's still we've seen some crazy things over the years with teams maneuvering and things happening in just such a way. And, 2007 being a long time ago, but still fresh in the collective minds of everybody that follows college football. But I think there's still a clear road for Tennessee, but Tennessee, if Michigan beats Ohio State, what's the argument for, the Tennessee Ohio State argument becomes one where, nobody in that category of nobody from the Big Ten is going to have that Alabama win. And so that's going to be something to really, really help Tennessee.
Yeah. And I mean, what's Tennessee's second best win at that point? Alabama and
the blowout against LSU, 40-13 over LSU. So that's the other one.
Yeah, that's the other one. But again, that we've talked about that before. LSU was missing starting left tackle, starting left guard. So, if you want to just look at the top line score, yes, but also that feels like a relevant piece of information as well. So yeah, that's going to be at least an interesting conversation. Yeah, Ohio State will have the Penn State win, we'll have the Notre Dame win. So yeah, that'll be at least an interesting conversation. It feels that's why I feel like Tennessee is ahead of either of the ACC teams, no matter who comes out of there. Because I have 4 teams in the. So you're telling me there's a chance bucket, and that is Alabama, USC. Is USC winning they're in? Because they've got 2 tough opponents left. They're at UCLA and home for Notre Dame. Maybe they're winning you're in. They're so far behind everyone that the committee will have to vault them over a couple other folks. And also, at UCLA, Notre Dame, and also then they have to win the Pac-12 championship game against Lord only knows who will still be standing at that point. Maybe Oregon, maybe Utah. I mean, those are 3 difficult games in a row. So I frankly just don't think they're going to do it. I think if they run that, then there's a pretty good argument they should get in, but they're probably not going to. And then the 2 ACC teams, Clemson and North Carolina, the resume just isn't really there. And, North Carolina, I keep waiting for them to move North Carolina up. and they have very stubbornly not moved North Carolina up. I think they're still 15th or something like that, 13th. So they're sort of telling you like, one win over Clemson is not going to vault you from 13 to 4. So it feels like that's, they're on there just out of historical precedent that a 12-1 conference champion almost always gets in, but almost does not always, Tony.
The conspiracy theorist in me says, yeah, we think North Carolina is going to win out, so let's keep them in the back. That way, when we jump them up from like 15 to 7, be like, look at how high we jumped them for winning the ACC. That's a big thing, but it wasn't big enough. But I do think USC, if they can win those, because you said UCLA, Notre Dame, and then Oregon or Utah, like you said, who knows? That's 3 tough wins, and nobody else is going to have that stretch, and nobody else will be able to accomplish that stretch and add that stretch to their resume. And it's certainly going to be better than some teams losing, like in Ohio State or Michigan. Now, I still think that one of those would still have a very good shot, but I think USC with 3 wins, they go ahead of Tennessee. And then where's TCU in there? I expect TCU probably, wins out at this point, but I was impressed by what they did against Texas. Quinn Ewers really looked off in that one, and it's not the first time he's looked off. But I think if USC can do this, and like you, I do not expect them to do that, especially now losing running back Travis Dye, probably for the season. So Caleb Williams is going to have to do it all on his own, and that's not fun for a quarterback with Alex Grinch's defense. So I do expect them to eventually lose. But if they win out, man, that's better than what Tennessee did. And it's better than what the loser of Ohio State, Michigan did. So, keep an eye on them for sure. But I don't expect them to go 3-0 over the next 3 games.
Yeah, they may, you can move them up to the needs a little help bucket from the, so you're telling me there's a chance bucket if you'd like to. But the needs a little help bucket includes they need a little help from themselves to win 3 games that are going to be, kind of coin tossy type of games. And, just based on program history, conference history, that feels like, what could possibly go wrong. So we will have if you enjoyed this, great news. We're going to have, speaking of the extra data point, Tony, we're going to have an extra data point later on tonight when the College Football Committee releases their Week 3 rankings, 7 o'clock Eastern. We will be on live at youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle, covering all of that. We'll give you some instant analysis, insight, break down what changed, how likely it means, we will have new information to maybe shift some teams around in these buckets as well, and maybe USC jumps up a bunch. We'll see. But that'll be always a fun and lively conversation. Lots of fun comments and all that from you guys. So please join us at youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle later on tonight, 7 o'clock. For that live show. Kevin Noon, Tony, and I breaking all of that down for you. That'll do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.